turned it into a lullaby that summons her. Eli?
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 horror film Lullaby. The film is directed by John R. Leonetti and it stars Una Chaplin, Ramon Rodriguez, Liane Balaban and Mary Ann Stevens. Now the film focuses on a married couple, Rachel and John, who have a newborn baby. Just recently her sister Vivian has apparently lost a baby, which has kind of driven her insane. So she ended up in an institute. But their mother sends her sister's baby things, basically, to them to see if they can make use of them. And in and amongst these baby items is a book that kind of allows you to sing lullabies in Jewish to your baby sort of thing. It's a very traditional book, which she finds quite charming initially. She sings from the book and unwittingly unleashes Lilith, who essentially comes from hell to snatch babies and leaves a golem in its place. Right, what are my thoughts on Lullaby? Well, this, on the very surface of it, would appear to be what you would think is a very, very generic horror film. There's a decent amount of polish to it. It's from the same director that directed Annabelle, which might not, sound really impressive, but he clearly knows what he's doing in regards to structuring scares, because I actually think Annabelle's a fairly decent film, if I'm honest. So it's got a fairly solid director. It's got fairly solid performances here. Una Chaplin and Ramon Rodriguez play a very believable married couple. Very loving couple with a young baby, all this kind of stuff. And it all feels pretty good. It's nicely polished. It's nicely shot. But unfortunately for this film, while I don't think it is a bad film, I think it's almost one of those horror films that's been spat out by an AI computer, where you just kind of type in what you want this film to look like and sound like and what the characters are going to say, type it all into an AI, press a green button and it spits out a script, and this is your film. There's very little here in regards to originality, that's for sure. I think the premise of, this entity, Lilith, coming and stealing babies, is a solid one. And they do give some very solid foundations. They give a backstory for Lilith, from Adam and Eve. It all makes sense, all that kind of stuff. And to hammer that home, they get a priest to tell that story. They go and see rabbis sort of thing, and they give them bits of information here, there, and everywhere. But it's literally one of those films where a big portion of the film is like these spooky things happening that they don't want to believe. They think it's hallucination through, tiredness for having a newborn baby, until they both realise they're kind of seeing the same things. And then they start taking it a little bit more seriously. She goes and sees her sister in the institute. She gets a little bit more information. It's one of those where, okay, they go from not believing it to absolutely believing it, and then investigating, trying to find a solution, which is what you see over and over again in horror films of this type. The well-trodden and well-used tropes in a horror film that this film relies on. Some of them work. There's jump scares here and there. Some of them are fairly effective, and some of them are a bit, roll your eyes at them moments. Now you've got Lilith in this. Now I think the introduction of Lilith initially is subtle, but creepy at times. When you see this horrific face looking back at you through like a closet or something like that, that's pretty effective. And there's like a shower scene where the husband thinks he sees Lilith. It's pretty effective. What's not as effective is they use pretty dodgy CGI to create like these minions of Lilith that are like demonic babies, or I think one of them was like a demonic puppy or something at one point, that are just not scary at all. And part of the reason they're not scary is because the CGI is just not good. They look pretty terrible. So whenever they're on screen, it does take away from the effectiveness of the film. But the effects for Lilith, for the most part, are pretty good, because it's an actress that's obviously made up to look like Lilith. So it is pretty much a tick box exercise, this film. It's one of those films that if you look beneath the surface or you pull at the threads, it'll fall to pieces. There's plot holes everywhere. You know, for example, her sister's in an institute. She goes to see her, gets some of the answers that she wants. Sister promises to help if she can get her out of the institute, and then the next scene, she takes her home. In the real world, there ain't no way you're getting that lady out of that institute, her sister, anytime soon. You know what I mean? All the red tape involved, and there certainly was no indication that she broke her out. So it's one of those films that kind of glosses over details like that, and it gets very, very silly by the end. About 3/4 of the way through, when they start battling this Lilith thing. It gets very silly, and I'm talking silly in a sense of you get characters getting sucked into mirrors, you get scenes with characters getting drowned in demonic babies, and you get other scenes of characters diving through windows, breaking them when they're carrying a baby in their arms and doing like a Captain Kirk flip on the floor. So it stretches the believability factor. When it's trying to land the ending, this film, unfortunately, I think it misses the mark. And it's one of these films as well that kind of breaks its own rules just to try and give you a scare. We're told that Lilith is coming, it's only interested in getting babies, and then there's a scene where it's attacking the husband in a car, when it should have been at the house trying to get the baby. You just kind of think, well, what was the point of that sort of thing? So I don't think this is a bad film. I just think it's fairly generic and tick boxy. I thought the performances are good. Una Chaplin's good, and if you don't know, Una Chaplin is the granddaughter of the great Charlie Chaplin. But if any of this sounds interesting, and this is a sort of subgenre that you like in horrors, you could do far worse than this. I've seen far worse than this for sure. I think this probably, if it had a little bit more originality and better CGI and a little bit of a better script, this could have elevated itself a little bit. As it is, it's certainly a very watchable horror film, but nothing more than that. So thanks very much for watching. I'll be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.